All right, we're back again after week 2 of the inquiry into Dalradian's plans for the Spurns. And if there's one way to sum it up, it's probably this. We're 2 weeks in. We're still trying to figure out what exactly is being proposed, how it stacks up, and why it was allowed to get this far in the first place. So I guess the best place to start is with the process itself, because that's where a lot of the frustration is coming from. There's supposed to be a public inquiry, but what we're seeing is a process that's becoming harder and harder for the public to actually engage with. We're now talking about key topics being pushed out to late 2026 and maybe even 2027. The inquiry itself, originally expected to run about 24 days, but now it could be double that, 50 days or more. And that's got real consequences. Because the people showing up every day, us, none of us are being paid to be there. Some of them are taking time off work, using up precious annual leave, giving their time for free. I have to admit, in my case, that's not the situation, as I'm retired. But we have certainly a number of people in that situation. And yet the process stretches on and on. This week, a lot of attention turned to them. And not entirely in a good way. There's a growing sense that this application was pushed to the inquiry before it was ready. Basic questions are still being asked. Key information is missing. And when pressed, we're hearing things like, "We can deal with this during the inquiry." But here's the problem. This is the inquiry. If information isn't there now, when is it exactly supposed to be there? And that brings us to the biggest issue of the week, and that's the lack of information. There's no current feasibility study underpinning this project. None at all. Instead, what we're told is the entire economic case is based on a detailed plan mine, which turns out to be a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet that hasn't been published, hasn't been independently tested, and hasn't been seen by most people in the room. So when people ask, where are these numbers coming from? The answer is essentially, trust us. And when you dig into those numbers, they really start to fall apart. Now, I have to admit, numbers are not my thing. But eventually I got my head around all of this. Take the gold valuation. Now this is where it gets interesting. The industry standard says that gold concentrate, which is what in this case is actually being produced, and that it sells for somewhere between 54% and 92% of the final refined gold price. Dalradian, they're claiming 96%. When asked to show the working, nothing. No breakdown, no clear explanation. Just that it's in the model somewhere. And when actual figures were discussed in the room, they pointed to something closer to 40%. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between a project that works and one that doesn't. Now, you might think like I did, well, surely the department checked all this. No, they didn't. The department's own economic branch admitted. They're not mining experts. They didn't verify the calculations, and they mainly relied on headline figures. At one point it was said they delve into bits and pieces. That's the level of scrutiny we're talking about by the department. And it's not just all about the numbers either. There's a serious gap right across the board. We're talking about missing reports, incomplete environmental statements, data that hasn't been made available to the public, and even reference to a report from the University of Edinburgh that simply doesn't exist. So again, people are asking, what exactly is this application based on? Then we get into what's actually mined. and even that isn't clear. At one point we're told gold is 99% of the value. At another point, they're talking about multiple minerals. So which is it? Because that matters, not just economically, but environmentally as well. And speaking of the environment, we're talking about waste that remains in perpetuity, but a closure plan that lasts for 15 years, and a problem that lasts forever. And even basic questions haven't been answered, like, what happens if the main waste facility fills up? Answer: not part of this application. There's also major gaps in the environmental assessment that we still don't have. Full carbon footprint calculations, environmental statements for additional minerals like silver or copper, and clarity on long-term impacts. And of course, there's the use of language, because terms like dry stack facility are being used when what we're really talking about is a toxic waste dump. And then there's the economic argument, because we're constantly told about the benefits, but when you break it down, it's not that simple. Sure, there's talk of jobs and wages, but we don't know how many will be local. We don't know how long they will last. And what we do know is this: the profits will be leaving the country, going straight to the shareholders, most likely in the US. And then there are real-world examples to look at. Take Tara Mines. A drop in market price recently, and hundreds of people were laid off. That's the reality of this boom-bust industry. It's volatile, it's uncertain, and doesn't always deliver what's promised. Now, coming back to the inquiry, we're seeing ongoing confusion about roles. The Commission is asking questions. The Department is saying it can be dealt with later, and around it goes. At one point, as I said earlier in the week, it had to be said clearly: the inquiry is not the place to process the application. That's the Department's job. And yet here we are. 2 weeks in, only 23 out of 155 questions answered, key issues still unresolved, and the whole thing at risk of stretching on for months or years, bringing into reality the horror of my dystopian daydream during the public inquiry at some point last week about being permanently condemned to an everlasting public inquiry, much like a hamster in a wheel. But through all of this, there is one positive, and that's the level of our community engagement. People are showing up day after day. They're asking questions, challenging the gaps, the inconsistencies, the missing detail, because we know it's about our environment, our local economy, and the future of our area here in the Sperrins. So where does that leave us? Honestly, really with more questions than answers. And one big one sitting over everything: how did this application get to this stage without the basic information in place? We'll be back on May the 5th as things continue. But for now, that's where we stand after week 2. And as always, we stand for the air we breathe, the water we drink, the earth that supports us, and the health of our communities, both today and for generations to come. We hold the line. Thanks to everyone who's been there. See you soon.